Live.
Don't you dare kick me under the table right now.
We're live, Your Worship.
All right. Well, then I'm going to begin this and say, welcome everybody to the Township of Georgia May Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 1:36. I'm going to forego the land acknowledgement statement simply because I read one this morning and I don't want to cheapen it by repeating it too often. I'm going to ask council if there's any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. All right, seeing none, we will carry on. And I think I see there are 4 attending in the council chambers, and then I'm attending remotely, makes 5. So we have 5 out of 7, which qualifies as a quorum at this point. I'm not aware of any open forum requests, and therefore we're going to go straight into new business. Process improvement. Councillor Cooper, I'm going to put you on the spot to do the introduction of this item, and then we will discuss.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier. And I'm going to try and use the business method called KISS. Let's keep it simple, stupid. And what I mean by that is I just think the point I want to make is that I would like to see us today have a discussion about this initiative, the merits of it or not, and a couple of suggestions I have in terms of moving forward. So that was sort of what I was hoping to do. I don't know that we're going to necessarily want to deal with any subject matter once you hear what I'm suggesting and if you agree to it. If that's okay with everybody. Is there any concerns with me sort of blasting on with this?
No, I from my perspective, blast on. If we all start nodding off, then you know you've blasted too long.
That's why I'm keeping it simple, stupid. You're not.
I appreciate it.
So you can see from the reports, there's 2 reports. The second one is just sort of an update on the first one. I think what I really wanted to establish today is a couple of things. One is for us to look at the various initiatives, each of you, and I would suggest that we not do that today. It's a lot of different items, but I'd like to get some feedback from the councillors as to the merits of some of these aspects that appeal to you, some things you agree to, some things that you don't. That was sort of one objective for today, was just to throw that out there for feedback, either now, but ideally, I think it would be more productive if you had some time to sort of mull it over a bit more and say, I think this about that and so forth. So that's one aspect. The other thing I was hoping to be able to do with this council is to create some breakout teams. And what I was hoping to do with that is take 1 or 2, each of us, a team, take 1 or 2 of these items and go away and work on them and come back to the next committee of the whole and deal with 1 or 2 items. And we move through these various process improvement initiatives over the next few months. That was what I was hoping. And when I talk about the teams, what I tried to do was think about what might work best. And I was hoping we could create sort of 3 teams of 2 councillors, one from the Inland Lakes area, sort of either Ward 1 or 3, or conversely, somebody from Wards 2 or 4, so that we can sort of make sure that we're singing from the same hymn book, so to speak, between east of the 400 and west of the 400. So that was the objective. So and unless I hear otherwise, what I sort of did this somewhat arbitrarily, but I was suggesting that the first team would be Councillor Bocek and Councillor Hazelton. And, they've both got lots of experience in the area, and I thought they could say it was A, be the team, and B, identify a couple of these subject matters that are of interest to them and bring them to council, committee of the whole, for discussion in the next month, whoever's going to step up first, I guess. And I don't want to leave it too loosey-goosey, but I would appreciate all of us taking a look at this. So the first team was Brian Bocek and Al Hazelton. The second team was Steve Predko and yours truly, Peter Cooper, as a team, and then Christian and Councillor Jarvis. So that was sort of my suggestion. And Mr. Mayor, what I was hoping you could do is maybe sit in each project, one of the projects with, in other words, pick in the month of March or April, I should say, one of the teams and be part of that team, and then the next month another team. That way you'd be A, part of the process, and B, you'd get to see what's going on with each one of the teams that are tackling these projects. And as far as our CAO, I volunteered him for something as well. I can see he's very excited about that at the moment. But I was thinking he could sort of act, especially in council, the committee of the whole. It could be a bit of a facilitator, if you wouldn't mind, sort of, in other words, chairing that so that we can have these open discussions in the committee of the whole and have the council members participating as opposed to trying to chair the meeting. Would you volunteer for that? Is that allowed? Is there any reason that he couldn't do that?
It's not really allowed because he's a staff member.
Right. But it's for discussion purposes?
A chair needs to be a member of the committee or council.
He's not a member of the committee,
I know, that's what I'm saying. He's not,
so he'd be a facilitator.
I guess. He wouldn't be the chair. You
Well,
couldn't call him the chair.
give some thought as to how we might, rather than trying to bring somebody in, figure out, maybe we can figure out a way to do that. I'm just, I'd like to have your help, but B, have you sort of part of the process as well. So anyway, maybe you guys can think about how that could happen. But so that's sort of really where I was going with this, that we'd decide, for example, that I'll just give you an example here. So maybe Councillor Graziano and Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Jarvis expressed some interest in process improvement related to having debriefs. And so maybe he and Councillor Graziano would pick item number 1 and agree to report back to us in April for the committee of the whole, and see if they've identified some of the aspects of this, what can be done, what can't be done, what sort of a go forward program for that particular process improvement item. I guess the only other thing that I put in here that I thought you might be interested in is just the sort of, I'll call it dictionary assessment of what process improvement means. It's pretty simple. It's just really trying to take a look at some of the things we do and come up with ways of maybe doing it better, or if there isn't a better way to do things, so be it, but at least let's examine it. I have a feeling that we can identify usually something that's working well, something that may not be, something that's impeding us. Let's find out what that is and see if we can work around it. We'd be consulting with our staff to find out what they feel about some of these things, and that could be all part of this sort of examination by the various teams. So that is what I was proposing. I'd love to have some feedback. Anybody like to jump in? Councillor Bocek?
Yeah, reading the report and thinking that there's some good ideas in here. Three things actually that came to mind was collectively, as we pair off and research and understand better the processes, I think the conclusion of that should probably end up in the CAO's hands. He's the one that directs staff. He's the one that implements policies and procedures. So the report from each of the groups should end up in the hands of the CAO. That's my one point.
Okay.
Second point is some of our departments are provincially mandated and legislated. And we really have no control over their policies or procedures, and they certainly can't bend from them to appease us. So I believe it's building, fire. I don't think we can get planning involved in that, but building and fire are provincially legislated, and they have to follow their rules, not our rules. Okay? And I think outside of that, a period of digestion would be good on this. I like the concept of thinking of ways that we think things can improve, but not instilling any of this whatsoever. It would have to go back to staff. Staff gather together, take all our suggestions that we've offered to them, and then come back to us and say, this is what they can implement or can't implement. So that's just my feelings on the whole thing.
Good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis?
Yeah, I appreciate the report, Councillor Cooper. I think it's all stuff that I'm glad it's been brought back forward and put in front of us. I'm wondering, and I'm looking at the second item, since it's an update on the first. And if you look at your report recommendations, I think there are a dozen of them there. Peter, is that about right? Yeah, a dozen.
Yeah, about a dozen, yeah.
I'm wondering if some of them we can't have a look at almost immediately, and others, I think we need some clarification on how far we can go with them, so to speak. If we, I don't know how much time we want to take this afternoon, but if we look at process improvements, number one, reviewing OLT cases, I think it's pretty straightforward. And you've described what is part of that, and I'm wondering if we could just set it in place as something we should be able to discuss at a future COW, or even depending on the nature of the litigation, maybe have to do it in closed session. I'm not sure which, but I think there's a lot there that, based on your description, that we can work with as is. I don't know that we have to do much more discussion in a breakout group to bring it forward. I think it might be good the way it is, just my observation. And then where was it here? Like in identifying and selecting consultants and experts, I need to know, I think we need to know how far we can go on that with our recommendations. I think it's pretty straightforward, codes of conduct, trying to make sure both councillor and staff are in line makes a lot of sense. And I don't know that that's going to take a lot of work on anybody's behalf, just a matter of bringing the two together. But what I'm getting at here is I think maybe some of these things we can address immediately. Some need a little bit more clarification from the standpoint of where we can go without overreach, and then break out from there.
All right, we've heard from two of you. Councillor Predko, I guess you're next.
Sorry.
Given the lineup we have here.
I was just responding to Councillor Jarvis. That was all. But
Oh, I didn't hear it.
I'm sorry. I had my microphone off. We were trying to. No, I'm kidding.
We forgot you were there.
Anyway, I think we can sort of. I hear what Councillor Jarvis is saying, and there's some validity to it. But I think we've also heard from Rick O'Connor, and a lot of the things that are here are things that we discussed frankly in the meeting with him, and he indicated that these are the council does have the power to do certain things, at least to examine things, and maybe there's certain things we can and can't do. Let's identify that. And but I was trying to keep that in mind in terms of the subject matter. Sorry for jumping in there in front of you, Steve Predko, but do you have some feedback too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I didn't realize we were going across the front of the table, but I was going to raise my hand next anyway. So I think to piggyback on some of the things that Councillor Jarvis was saying, there's a lot of interesting ideas in here and things that we could be trying to achieve. And then my only concern is some of these things may be in our staff's hands and under our CAO's purview, and I guess that notion of overreach comes to mind. And the two items in particular, one is the procurement policy and breaking out subject matter experts and legal counsel. And I understand the intent that we want to do, and I think there's some discussion that councillors can have in terms of thoughts and what we would like to recommend. But then at the end of the day, it's going to go back to staff for work. And a lot of these things, I can see us having a short report from these council groups, but ultimately the implementation and the work has to go back to staff. So, and again, I think the annual staff work plans with 25% of their effort being allocated to council matters is something that may be difficult. I think as I think Councillor Bocek was mentioning, some people's jobs are dictated by provincial legislation, and they have to do what they have to do. So that a fixed number of 25%, may be something that is hard for council to impose on staff. So I think we've got a lot of areas where we can provide input, but I think ultimately we have to make sure that we are providing some thoughts to our staff and our CAO that they are ultimately going to have to run with. So I think I'm not sure if the CAO or any of the staff have any comments on how we would implement some of these process improvements, or how far council would take that and pass it off. I'll maybe give that to our CAO if that's all right, through the mayor.
Sure, I'll let our CAO speak before I do.
Thank you, Councillor Predko. There are some great ideas. I think if we're going to work through some of these ideas, it should be as a partnership. And right now, I'm not seeing that. Right now, I'm seeing working groups composed solely of councillors, and with me facilitating, which makes me feel uncomfortable. I'll be honest. And some of the elements that have been brought forward have been as the result of a training session with one trainer. And we've had training sessions with lots of different trainers. And whereas Rick O'Connor is very experienced, we should also rely on, the feedback from other knowledgeable people. Mr. O'Connor is a veteran. He's a veteran of the city of Ottawa, and he's a legal slash clerk veteran. I think we should also listen to other experts who have different ranges of expertise as well as part of the training. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but really, if we want to go down the path of process improvement, it should be, part of process improvement is to be encompassing everyone as a team, because you want buy-in from everyone. So that's my initial thought.
Thank you. I appreciate this list, and I'm right now, frankly, looking at the March 4th document, which is, I guess, I don't know, it says moved by, but it's like, I want to go through, there's a dozen items, and I'd like to react to each one. And I'm going to call it a gut reaction as opposed to a carefully considered, because other input is available. But I want to give my gut reaction because I think what I would really like to come out of this meeting today is an action plan. It can be a very incomplete action plan because we don't want to be here all day. But I don't want us to, in August, we looked at all this and said, okay, we're going to encompass this in the training and go forward, but that didn't fully address it. It was an initial step, if I can put it that way, in my mind. So, first one, and I'm just going to go down the list in order, and I'm not valuing them in any way, but the first one, process improvements through debriefs. That's all about planning, basically, is what I'm reading there. And in my mind, that's a perfect opportunity for a working group formed by Derek Whitlib, get staff involved, and involving Councillor Cooper because he's been the most, I was going to say outspoken, but that's not a fair term, the most verbal or reminding us that this is important, and maybe one or two other councillors. And let's create the list and let's come up with a summary that actually becomes then a tool for us to consider, because very importantly, the zoning bylaw and the official plan reviews are coming up. And I think this, I'm talking about now basically a master debrief. This is important for us to consider, because if we as council or committee of adjustment are looking at things differently than staff, well, staff's looking at it based on current policy. So that means there should be modifications to policy or some different understandings. And to me, anyway, that's my reaction to number one. We should encourage perhaps Director Whitlib to form a working group with a couple of councillors, and whether or not you want one or two non-councillors, doesn't matter. And this would be effectively part of the official plan and zoning bylaw review process, is let's get input, including where there were splits in the past between elected or appointed officials and the staff. So that's my reaction there. Goal setting for each term of council. I mean, we did sit down and do a strategic plan a couple of years ago that helped set us some goals. And I think the CAO sitting down with each member of council to discuss their objectives. I'm sure some conversations like that have taken place already, and I imagine they continue. So I see this as not requiring a working group or anything else. I think it's, yes, we should set our goals each term of council. And it may behoove us at this point to spend a few minutes in a committee of whole reviewing those of 2 years ago to say, are we actually doing it or aren't we? But I don't see this as requiring I'll call it a subcommittee of one form or another, or working group, or whatever the term is. Identification and selection of consultants and experts. I think we have to be careful here. We did talk a couple of times in the past about modifying our procurement policy, and realize that there are certain legal limitations, certain provincial regulation limitations. But I think it behooves councillors as individuals, or possibly as council, to provide input into that selection when we have input to provide, such as we know somebody who we think should be considered, but I don't think it's appropriate for us necessarily to pick those individuals. And my reason is that whether we want to admit it or not, each one of us as councillors are slanted, are biased, have certain things that we value more than other things, whereas staff is hired to be neutral. And so I think it's important that we not bias the process to the degree that some of our residents, or some of our applicants or appellants or what have you, think that we're trying to slant the table unfairly. So I think this is one where we have to be very careful. But I think it's, having said that, I think it is important that when we have input to provide, we do provide the input. Annual staff work plans. I have trouble with this one, because I don't like the idea that staff will start out the year with only 75% of their time booked. And I probably for a couple of reasons. One is we know that whenever we pass resolutions, that they're going to require staff time. If they're lucky, it'll require a day's worth of work. Sometimes, though, it'll require months or maybe even years worth of work. I'm thinking of official plan review, for instance. And I'm also conscious of the fact that majority of our staff, if council never met again, they'd keep themselves busy and constructively and in service of our residents. So I don't like this request because it implies that, okay, we're now going to say to the staff, take 25% of what you think are your lowest priority, set it aside, and wait for council to give you direction. And I don't think I'm being unfair to council when I say some of our direction that we give is far more of a much higher priority than other direction. Because we can have opinions on all sorts of things that are big and all sorts of things that are small. And so I don't want to see staff throw out a big project and all of a sudden we all of a sudden say that well, you should have more water fountains. But they stopped reviewing the official plan. I'm going to extremes here, but to illustrate what my concern. Gaining better understanding of the roles we play. We've had quite a bit of training on this from a number of different people with different angles on it, but the role we play and the role staff plays is fairly well. The definition starts with the Municipal Act, and so I don't know exactly how we're going to address this, and I don't think it's appropriate for a committee of 2 councillors to address this. I would rather people address it that are more qualified, and absolutely that would include a staff member or 2 who are quite experienced in this area. And I think it also means taking heed to the training we've had to date that does at times talk about the role of council versus the role of staff and that. Codes of conduct, absolutely. I think the code of conduct is something that, I mean, I know that the clerk was working on looking at the code of conduct and some other policies that are related to the code of conduct. And I forgot what their names are, but clerk knows. And also I know the inconsistencies between the councillor and the staff code of conduct is again something at one point I believe we were trying to combine it. And then we found that there are some differences that were significant enough that maybe we shouldn't. So I think that is something that should be part of that review that was initiated. Was it half a year ago, Clerk Way, or something?
It was August,
Okay.
and it was agreed.
So I think that's in motion. Changes to process or legal interpretations. I'm not quite sure what we're talking about here. So I'd like more clarification, frankly, on this one. That when staff want to introduce a major departure in process or a major change in legal interpretation, there might be specific examples, but I need more to, I'll call it, make any more comment on that. Training and orientation program. We've done a fair bit of that, and we're going to do some more. But I do like the sense of history. I think that all of us, and that's just a personal evaluation, is that the historical perspective, I think has value, especially for newer councillors and newer staff members. And one example is I think it's terrific when councillors or staff members take new people out on tours of parts of the township they haven't seen. So they give you a tour of a 6 Mile Lake or Cognasheen or what have you. I think that's also part of what I think is important, is that that whether it's a counselor or whether it's a staff member, or even in some cases a consultant, an appreciation of the different geographies of our township and the challenges they present, I think is important to understand. I know, speaking for myself, the tours I've had on, like, I'll pick Go Home Lake and Stewart Lake and 6 Mile Lake and I'm overdue for one in Gloucester Pool, hint, 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 world, is invaluable because it gives me a perspective of what people, what we share in common and what differences we have in different parts of the township. I think that part's invaluable. Email addresses, we have talked about this, in my mind, a little too often. And I think that we need to, we did land on one spot, I don't know how many, a couple of years ago. Obviously, that hasn't been fully satisfactory to everybody. And I think that I do believe that we need to further encourage our residents to allow us to use their email addresses, because I just think it's so much more practical than snail mail in many ways, let alone reaching out and all the other media. But I think we have to be very careful how we do it. But I see that as a project. Can I put it that way? Even though I think, was it a year ago? I lose track of time. A year ago that there was an updated report on this. I've forgotten when it was. Access to information made available to council members. Each member council is charged with responding to doing their own research. That's not necessarily the mandate per the Municipal Act, but most of our councilors are enthusiastic enough about their jobs that they try to glean more information and better inform their perspective. And I think that is okay. I think that's a good thing, actually, very good thing. They refreshed the procedure bylaw to allow individual members to obtain information directly from staff. I think we have to be careful how we do that. And what I mean by that is we do not want an individual member to appear to be directing staff or consuming too much of their time. But at the same time, I think some conversation between individual members and individual staff members are invaluable. It's a great way of exchanging information. And I think we have to be careful how we do this. That the worst case scenario, and I'm not picking on any current council, that may be very clear, but because we hear about stories from other councils, the worst case scenario is a councillor who walks into the office on a near daily basis. Let's pick on Councillor Bocek because he's nearby. He could do it if he wanted to, and I'm not accusing him of doing it, but walks in on a near daily basis and sits down in somebody's office and says, let's have a cup of coffee, and walks out an hour and a half later. Now, if that councillor is doing that every day to a staff member, there's a whole bunch of time lost and perhaps undue influence on staff, because the staff members might say, well, this councillor is actually speaking for council because he's speaking or she's speaking with great confidence. Well, but it may not be the case. So again, that's why I think we have to be careful about how we do this. Inviting participation and obtaining other perspectives, absolutely. And I think the working groups idea, submissions, one-on-one, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand that any resident has access to staff. Now, it may be somewhat restricted depending upon the nature and all that sort of stuff. And maybe they have access to the senior manager versus the frontline work. But, you know, and I've witnessed it on a almost daily basis. The resident comes in the front, asks some question. Can you tell me this or that? The front desk staff say, you should talk to Ms. Nicholson. And if she's available, she's out having the conversation, or they make an arrangement for an appointment. So I think this happens to some degree already. And I think, so I think we can look if there's some ways that we should encourage it a little bit more. But the idea of working groups, and that I think is important. And 12, protecting township from potential liabilities. that's one of our responsibilities. I'm not sure, again, how we're going to manage this. I think it's important, and if somebody has input for us, but I think this is, again, and this has to be worked out with staff as well. You know, we know the insurance company provides some risk management advice in certain areas. I think that's important to heed. We know that the building department and planning department are aware of exposures through their line of work, and I think they can provide input. So I think this is an important thing to follow, but again, I'm not sure we need two counselors to sit down in a room and talk back and forth on this one. I think this requires staff input and I think if there are, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few residents, I mean, this for all of them, there's a few residents out there that may have input to provide in one or two of these topics. Well, I would encourage that resident, please do so. Send a note, a memo, ask for a meeting with our CEO, ask for a meeting with our mayor, ask to make a deputation to council. I think, you know, the door isn't shut for people providing input. And I've spoken long enough, but that's my fast reaction to these 12 items. Some of it being more, I'll call it complete than others, obviously, but there you go. Councillor Bocek, you had your hand up for a while.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Coates. I was kind of expecting this to be coming at us eventually, and I'll tell you why. In my first term on council, the mayor had given us portfolios, which was one councillor with one senior member of council, and the two of them worked through the problems and the issues that were in that department. And then recommendations came to council that was supported by the staff member and by council. That was eliminated. The portfolios were put by the side. So a lot of the communication between council and staff went away. I'll give you a typical example, and our fire chief is here. One of the portfolios that two of us were given, Councillor Cynthia Douglas and myself, were to work with the chief to go over the fire master plan. So we had a subcontractor, we had a chief, we had the two councillors, and we basically listened. You know, if we had some concerns, they were aired out. But that is, I think, what Councillor Cooper here is trying to achieve is more conversation, more communications between council and staff. How that happens doesn't really matter to me. I mean, the mayor has made mention that maybe having two councillors discussing it by themselves is not a good idea. Good for you. That's a good observation that maybe a staff member should be involved. But when we moved away from the portfolios, we moved away from council's communication with senior staff members. You made mention that some councillors come in and have the ability, we've been afforded the ability to sit down and talk to senior staff members. I think if you talk to our senior staff members, you'll find out someone like me comes in, talks to Greg about boating and talks with hunting with Derek, and perhaps not the things we should be talking about. And then we throw in a couple of things that, you know, that are council oriented. I'm in support of what Councillor Cooper has brought forward here. I've expressed my reservations about our fire department and our building department, which are not mandated by council or even by our CAO, I guess. So those two would have to be eliminated. And then whether we structured of two councillors and a senior staff member or one councillor and a senior staff member, it doesn't really matter to me. I just think we need to come up with a plan, execute the plan, review it in 3 or 4 months, see if it's working. And if it does, let's continue with the practice, maybe even write a policy on it. But I think there's value here. I just don't know what the final state of this will turn out to be and how effective it'll be. But if we give it a trial period, maybe we'll find out it's not effective and we'll revert back to what we're doing right now. But those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. The other thing I forgot to mention as I went through all these 12 points, I think it's very important that we get staff input on this. Sometimes, sadly, just inform us of how our hands are tied based on legislation or current policy. But also, I think it's important that staff tell us what they need from council. And how they want to work with council. Council Jarvis, sorry.
Yeah, in light of comments that have been made, I'm just wondering if maybe we could take a couple of cow sessions, split this up and prioritize a few things and go through them as a whole in a cow format. Some of these things wouldn't take very long. Some of them might have to be deferred to staff totally, or maybe we have to drop them entirely. I don't know, but I think maybe going through them here at Cal, take a couple right now and do them. I think maybe we could get these things done in fairly short order, and that way we have everybody involved, staff and council.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Councillor Cooper.
Lots of good feedback. Thank you. And just to clarify, I had no intention of not involving staff. What I really was hoping to do was get a couple of councillors working together to flesh out some ideas around these subject matters. Obviously, and I didn't say it earlier, but obviously work with the staff in an area where the staff could add some benefit, and then bring it back to committee of a whole with a report saying, well, this is what we've discovered. I think maybe we shouldn't go down this road, or we should, and here's where we're doing really well, but we need to improve on blah, 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 whatever it is. So Councillor Jarvis is quite right. I guess I sort of assumed that would be the process, that we would be involving all of council and staff near the time that we've developed some initiatives related to any one of these particular subjects. That was my hope and intent. I hope that helps a bit. As far as all the different ideas and feedback, what I would welcome is not just I'm scribbling away here trying to make notes as fast as I can, but I'd like to have a little more dialogue with each of you and go through the list so that we can then move forward. That's sort of my hope. And as far as the suggestion of having something like we had in the past, where it involved councillors and senior staff on the finance department or something like that, I think that's good. I'm trying to get at some of the things that have jumped out at me in the last 2 or 3 years as areas where we can hopefully make some slight improvements. I'd also like to say that I'm hearing a lot of things that we can't do because of what exactly. I'm not convinced that we may think we can't do it. I'm not convinced that we can't. So I'm going to be looking for clarity from our CAO and clerk as to where it is in the Municipal Act that we can't do one thing or another. I think we need to understand that very clearly because we've heard once again that we have the council is in charge in a sense. We're charged with making decisions and getting on with things, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So let's see if we can get to that end. Anyway, those are my comments. Thanks.
Well, not seeing other hands, and I'm wondering if, and following as Councillor Jarvis suggests, should we simply now turn to item 1 and have a discussion this afternoon on item 1, which is process improvements through debriefs, lessons to be learned, and it reads, be it resolved, the township levers this debrief approach to deal with, and you list 5 different things, which are basically, if I can summarize, and it's basically when council or committee sees things differently than the recommendations provided by planning.
Oh, Mayor, that's fine. I'd be happy to have that discussion today. It's not my decision. It's up to council. I'm just suggesting that we can go in and have a discussion, but we're in a sense winging it a bit without having done some research. And
Well, and that, I say where my discussion was going to go on this, what I'd really love to see is a summary list of the cases where OLT found against us, and with 1 or 2 points as to why.
I think that would be lovely. I can myself provide some reports that I don't have in front of me at the moment that identifies all of that kind of thing for the last 15 years.
Yeah, I know that, and I'd love you to sit down with Director Whitlib and perhaps another counselor and create a summary of that for all of council to consider, so that we can then say, okay, what was the problem? And if the problem was that our policy needs to be changed, then okay, then let's start addressing that policy change.
And I think that would be terrific. And what I would suggest then is that Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Graziano and yourself come back with a report to the rest of COW with some research, and I'd be happy to share any of my information with you. And I just think that right now we are sort of shooting a little bit in the dark without any evidence. So I think that's the only reason I'm suggesting that we deal with it with more of a bit of substance and evidence.
No, but I was volunteering you actually with Director Whitlib, because you have a lot of the information.
I'm sorry?
You have a lot of the data for the last 15 years, unlike the rest of us as councillors.
Except that I've shared it with you.
Well, but I think it should be shared with Director Whitlib. And what I'm suggesting now, I'll be quiet very soon, let other councillors mix it. I'm suggesting a working group, you, Director Whitlib, and another councillor, to come up with that list and a summary of it.
Fair enough. I'm happy to do that too. And I'd appoint Councillor Jarvis only in that he expressed an interest at the last meeting about this particular subject. And so I'd be happy to do that. But I think we'd want to have that in front of us to walk through some of this and understand what works, what doesn't work, what we can do from a planning perspective, et cetera. So if Director Whitlib is willing to sit down with us and go through that, is that suitable for you? You lucky guy. Okay. And we could come back and report on that. Councillor Jarvis, is that something that you're interested in? And Mayor, if you'd like to be part of that working group, great.
Okay.
It's up to you to decide what you want to be part of. And I've sort of said to all the rest of the councillors, should be maybe looking at this list and getting back to me with what sort of rings, I don't know what the right expression is, what can you connect with and can relate to as opposed to not. So I would ask that you come back and identify what is a hot button for you.
No, I personally think this is important, especially given that we're going to do an official plan and zoning bylaw review, that because I think this could provide important input to that review. And that's why I think it's a good exercise.
Terrific. A good idea.
Councillor Wojcik.
Through you, Mayor, I think that sounds like a great plan. It's a good start. And that's just where I'll leave it. It's a good start. I can see this progressing into perhaps Councillor Hazelton and myself being another group, maybe involving the mayor as well too, as step number 2, and address issues that we feel are important, say with the operations department. Since we're looking at the planning department here with these two, maybe these two need to deal with important issues that we have in the operations department. But I personally, I would like to see the, not experiment, but the process and how it shakes out with Mr. Jarvis, Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Cooper, perhaps yourself and Mr. Whiblett. See if it's successful in achieving something, and if it is, move this program to the next stage where Hazelton and I would meet with whoever to deal with issues in that particular realm of things. So I think this is good, a good start, but just a start is where we need to be right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on number 1 at this time? All right. Shall we discuss number 2? Number 2, goal setting for each term of council. Councillor Jarvis.
Councillor Cooper has pretty much defined in a way what needs to be done there, what his observations there. I think one way or the other, I know that I have sat and talked to the CAO on more than one occasion. I know I've talked with you on more than one occasion. But I think it behooves us, as noted here, that I think sitting down individually with both you, Mr. Mayor, and our CAO at the beginning of council, or now it's a little bit into council, but maybe we should be sitting down and making sure that both sides are clear on where we want to be through this term. I think it's a very, very key part of what we do and how we do it. But I don't know we need to discuss this any further. It's very, very straightforward in the way it's been set out here in this report.
Well, Councillor Cooper.
I think that's true. And what I was really trying to achieve here was maybe formalize the lines of communication that we, in fact, do this as opposed to not do it. And I like the idea of a one-on-one. We do have lots of group discussion at council and the committee of the whole, et cetera, but this would be a chance to have a one-on-one and with each you Mayor and their CAO. So it's not, I don't think it has to take a massive amount of time, but it's it's opening up those lines and making sure that it does happen as opposed to may not.
Well, how about I make a commitment is once I get the stupid health issues behind me, we'll start booking appointments.
And could we ask the CAO for the same thing?
Sorry, I
think
didn't
it
have
could be
my
done.
microphone on. I was going to suggest that maybe the mayor and myself could do it together, so we can streamline it.
And perhaps the
If you
resolution.
like it, I think it'd be good one way or the other.
Perhaps it could be codified in the new term training package that there's an opportunity for one-on-one sessions to set goals for councillors and council. That shouldn't be too difficult either, right? Is that?
See, we already have process improvement.
Yeah. Hey, I'm so excited. I'm going down to number 3. Sorry.
Number 3, if I can,
Or do you want, or are there more hands raised on number 2?
yeah, I've got my hand raised, so just a short one. Councillor Cooper and I have talked about this, and I have the feeling that not a lot of us are going to be returning next term, and we kind of have to set the ground rules of what we've been able to achieve over the last few terms and bring that forward to the next term. And I think if we go into next term with a whole bunch of newbie councillors and they're dealing with what we're dealing with right today, there's going to be more confusion than there is today. So I want to address that before we go on, that this is not just for us. And it's not just for this staff, for this township moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree with you. I think we have to think about not just the next year and a half for this council, but we know, this time next year, people are going to start talking about who's running for council and all that sort of thing. And we have to give them a good starting blocks.
If I may, Mr.
Yep, please.
Also had some discussion about the point that's been raised here, which is that next term of council and some new players, that's if we get them to come forward.
Mhm.
Part of our discussion could be, how are we going to make sure that we have people that run for office and make sure that it's reasonably, and I'm not talking about huge changes in salary, I'm talking about things that will make people want to be involved. And that's sort of something that could be part of this discussion with the mayor and the CAO.
Mhm.
Got to sell the township of Georgian Bay and the
Well,
role.
and I'm going to encourage each of us during this year to have conversations with various residents to see why they might or might not be interested in being a counselor in the future. And that could be part of the input that could be very important to us.
And it can be kind of daunting sometimes if you've ever raised it with somebody.
Well, I've raised it with quite a few people, and it's interesting, the responses. Are we ready for topic number 3, council? Let's do it. Identification and selection of consultants and experts.
If I could just, if I may,
Please.
I think I realize that we have to be careful. I just do know, though, that when it comes to bringing in experts in legal matters and a variety of different areas, that it could be helpful if there was a little more consultation with council in terms of who would be providing us with advice and maybe looking for potential candidates. And in other words, I would encourage our CAO to give some thought to that. It's not to undercut our CAO, it's more to make sure that we bring in people that not only are experts in, let's say, legal lawyer of some sort, but we've all said we have a pretty unique place here. And we need people that can consult with us and provide us with input that get this place. And we're lucky enough to have a lot of talent within our midst, our constituents, and we need to take a greater advantage of that. And that was why I wrote this piece, because I think we don't always do that. Anyway, that was the objective there for me.
Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Predko, please.
Yeah, I suppose this is about the one item I have a bit of contention with, because I'm thinking back on a recent when we were dealing with certain aspects of a lawsuit. It was a closed session, and we had ample opportunity, and we did contribute to what the person that was chosen to help us out with it legally. And I think it was very, very open the way it was approached by staff. I think we worked pretty hard together as a group to come to a decision on it. So I'm having trouble with this, and that I think that we already do this. Maybe it's something we need to put more to make more formal. But in that case, and I think since there has been ample opportunity for council to provide input on, certainly from a in the legal context, how we move forward. On top of that, I think and I'm not sure if that's part of this or not, and maybe Councilor Cooper can help me. Are we also thinking about the possibility of using people that are more people within our community itself that are experts and leaning more on them per council's direction?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And I'm suggesting that if we can find people that are as highly qualified as somebody we might find from Burlington, Ontario, that doesn't understand Georgian Bay, let's get somebody that has the same set of skills, but understands where they are.
So people like David Flowers and Tom Bain and
Alan
Ian,
Heisey,
Ian Davis, the type of people that we know in this community that we've actually worked with before, worked with us.
yes, that's
Yeah,
all I'm
okay.
really suggesting. And I
Yeah.
think we have done some of this. I'm just encouraging that we have a lot of talent available to us, and let's see if we can go down that road more frequently. That's all. That was the objective here.
Councillor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So my comments would really echo quite a bit of what I think Councillor Jarvis was just saying, and I get my hand up because I need to put my own spin on it. But I understand the interest in relying on local experts because they do understand our area. The reason I'm concerned about it being a decision made by council is that we may have relationships with these people that would lead to perceptions of conflict, depending on who they are. So I think if it's a decision made by staff, we're not putting ourselves in a position where we would be making a conflict of interest, but we would be, and I think the intent is that we would be able to encourage staff to consider these people and use their unbiased hats to make a final decision. The other area that's in this, and I do agree with Councillor Jarvis that especially in the legal counsel discussions we've had, I think we've had a lot of good discussions where our CAO has taken council's opinions and direction in making a decision on which council we have selected or he has selected. More broadly, though, when you see the list of procurement would exclude the selection of consultants, legal counsel, ward boundary expert, integrity commissioners, subject matter or training experts. That's a lot of decisions at the end of the day that council would be making in places like IT, support contracts and service providers. We'd be probably getting involved in, depending on how it was defined, well, all kinds of things. So does that then become a consent agenda item where we really are giving up most of our control anyway, or do we delegate that authority? So I think what we need to do is have a method of providing input that is heard and taken into account by staff, but I don't think at the end of the day council needs or should be the final decision maker on these things. But there may be individual circumstances where we give direct recommendations that we expect staff to follow. Thank you.
Councillor Bocheck.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. This is the one I've had a problem with throughout all my time on council. Using qualified people, friends out on the bay or whatever, to save us some money. And being that they're experts in their field. I see no value to this because there's a bias there. Say a lawyer out on an island in Georgian Bay will have a completely different opinion when asked the same question a lawyer up on the Severn River. They're both our constituents. They're both within the township. They both have conflicting answers to it. Who do you believe? That one out there or this one in here? So I'm not a big fan of that. There has to be a criteria when we hire an expert. There has to be a criteria put into place. This is why we're hiring, because he's unbiased, he has this credentials, and he'll best serve the residents of our community. So I'm not a big fan of what's being suggested here, but what I am a big fan of is finding a way to bring these subject matter experts into the fold in the way of an expert witness when needed. So I'll give you an example. If we have something major on a septic system that's going to end up in court or whatever, we could call on someone like Tom Bain to come in on behalf of the township and give expert testimony as to what's going on. To rely on him to be the one that carries this forward, I think is a problem. We need, the township, our staff need to pick the expert, the person, the lawyer, whoever, that's going to best serve everyone in our township, not a community within our township. That's pretty much all I got on that one.
Councillor Cooper.
I hear the concerns being raised, and I think if you give some consideration to the verbiage in this piece, it talks about terms of reference. And terms of reference means that we develop a list of any role that's out there. We develop a terms of reference, and people that are qualified experts, we would just be taking advantage of the fact that some of them actually understand Georgian Bay if they could be perceived as, or decided by us and our CAO as individuals that can be objective as well. So that's all I'm suggesting here, is that they'd obviously have to meet the standard to be able to do the job. They'd also have to be able to demonstrate a very unbiased approach to their work. So that was the reason for that. I think we'd have to have a very sort of strict set of terms of reference. It's a recruiting job, really. Anyway, that's what I was thinking, that we should recruit people, and if they don't come across as being objective, then we wouldn't pick them. Pick somebody else. Anyway, that's sort of what I was thinking.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, just a further observation. Instead of having something that's hard coded into our system, and in light of comments made by my other fellow councillors here, to you, Mayor, I think that it behooves us as council to be a little more explicit in situations where subject experts that we know are available, that we put that into our recommendations to staff, that they look at the possibility of bringing in, I'll use Tom Bain as an example. If we have an issue over septic systems or whatever, that we explicitly indicate to staff that we would like at least his name to be considered as a subject expert in whatever work it is, or whatever we've asked of staff to do with regards to on work on whatever it is. I think this behooves council to work a little harder in that direction, because we know who these people are, and then I think it'd be up to staff to see if they can work with them or not.
I find myself half agreeing and half disagreeing, and I'll tell you why. I mean, one, on this list, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Clerk Way, but I believe the Integrity Commissioner is appointed by council. So in other words, we already do have the say there, even though staff will make a recommendation and we get to say yay or nay. I think with the rest, again, I've said this before, we'll say it again, I think we have to be careful. I think it behooves us. I think we have a responsibility to make recommendations to staff if we are aware of people with expertise that could be utilized. But I think, so that we don't look like we're being biased, I think the final decision has to lay with staff, has to lay with our CAO. If we've said, here are two lawyers you may want to consider. I mean, I know our CAO, when a lawyer is recommended to him, he works the phone, tries to get references. How good or not is this lawyer? What have they done things that are similar in the past? And that's, to me, that's important. I wouldn't want our CAO to simply hire a lawyer because 4 out of 7 counselors said, yeah, I think that guy's a good guy, get him. And even though we may be absolutely right, and he may end up hiring that person, I think we have to allow the CAO to do his due diligence, or he's not doing his job, in my opinion. And we know in cases in the past where local expertise has been utilized, and cases where it hasn't. But no, I think for me that staff should give. It says here, give priority recommendation by council. Staff should give careful consideration to recommendations by counselors, I think would be a more appropriate wording so that the CAO is empowered to do his or her due diligence. I think that part, I couldn't support council itself appointing these experts.
Could just interject here. I'm going to suggest that as a project, Councillor Predko could perhaps, he took a fair bit of interest in this, be part of the team that examines this and refines the resolution. Is that something you'd be willing to do? Good. Well, that'd be great. Maybe. Fair enough. Just
All right. I want to do a quick review. We looked at item 1 and we concluded with process debriefs that Director Whitlib is going to work with 1 or 2 counselors to create a list. So that's going to be the starting point there. 2, goal setting each term. Both the CEO and I have committed to having midterm debriefs, if I can call it that, with individual counselors. 3, Councillor Predko has been volunteered to see if he can craft some wording that gets to what to summarize as best what we've been saying, and he may want to work with somebody like Clerk Way who knows where we're handcuffed and where we're not. I'll leave that up to the 2 of you to work out. But to me, the first 3 items we have follow-up. I'm not seeing anybody disagree. So I think that's a form of headway. I'll keep going until somebody stops me. Annual staff work plans. 25% has to be removed from the current work plans for direction from staff. Councillor Jarvis.
I have the privilege of being married to somebody who was a public service for 30 some odd years. And when she saw this, her mouth fell open. This is a difficult proposition. And while I think it's an interesting concept, I like the idea that, I mean, we think about this, and I think our CAO has mentioned that when at council we come up with a decision to do something, obviously we have to set a priority on it because the work plan for staff presumably has already been set for the year. They know what they're doing. Well, I think they know what they're doing. They keep telling me they know what they're doing, so I presume they know what they're doing. Just kidding. I know they know what they're doing. So how then do you set aside automatically a certain amount of time out of the year? How do they? I think it's really difficult to do. And I think what we do as council, what we need to do as council, is as we decide on things that need to be done, we also decide on the priority in the grand scheme of things. That comes down with the reports that we currently get prior to council on what's on the to-do list, as well as in legal files and stuff like that. But I think, again, that falls back on council to prioritize things, because I don't see how staff can automatically just set time aside. I don't think that's, it just doesn't seem feasible. Nice idea. I like the idea. I really do. Because that way we can fix stuff that we need done. But I think we're going to have to just sit there and prioritize as we go.
Other comments? Councillor Bocek.
Yeah, thank you. Further to my first comments about some of our departments being legislated provincially and mandated, should we give them the opportunity to address us or come to us and ask us if we could have a little task force with, say, our CBO, a couple of councillors, to address issues that are immediately concerning to her or to our fire chief, him? Like I said earlier, we don't want to step on those toes whatsoever. They're completely independent. But they may want to come to us. So I think there should be a provision there where if they're seeking advice or how they think it's going to come out at council, there should be that avenue to give them that opportunity.
Well, it's not unusual for departments to bring a staff report in front of us asking for our input. I mean, that's I'll call it standard procedure. You know, if the fire chief wants a new fire truck, he comes to us and he tells us what he's thinking and why, and is asking for approval, for instance.
But he doesn't want to get a no, right? So what he wants to do is he wants to consult, see if there's something that would be an appetite for council, or he can go spend a month making a report and bring it to council and get denied. Or he can have a conversation and just get it out there as a discussion and know that it's whatever, not a fire truck or whatever, but knows that his concerns are going to be addressed before he brings it to council with a big waste of time of all the procedures he needs to get it here. We could have a conversation where he asked me something and I said, did you ever think of this? And he goes, no, I never thought of that. Okay, we're going to put that aside.
Oh,
A simple conversation like what Peter would be doing with our director of planning.
Nothing stops staff from approaching individual councillors and asking their opinion.
I'm not familiar with that practice. I've been here 11 years. Never happened to me.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you because I'm sure when you're discussing hunting with Director Whitlam, sometimes the conversation may drift.
Never to policies, procedures, right? It may drift individual things that are on the agenda, but never encompassing something like we're talking about here, which is more all-encompassing about their department than it is about individual.
But our topic here is the proposal that staff set aside 25% of their time in their work plan for new business, if I can call it that, from council.
And I think
council gets to direct 25% of their time.
Yeah, my comment is to avoid that 25% of their time.
Sorry?
If it's a simple matter, if we're going to allocate 25% of their time, that's taking 25% of their time away from something else. They're already 100% occupied.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to come to the two counselors that are available to speak on this matter, and we have a quick discussion like we're talking about doing here, and that department decides, okay, it's not worth doing, then we won't move ahead with it. That's all I'm trying to get through here, that we're talking about percentages of time taking their attention away from their jobs to do something for council. And I don't agree with that. I think if they want to spend 1% of their time, have a little conversation with me and Mr. Pretko, that's different. But to allocate that amount of time, not into it.
Any other input? So I'm not sure what we're going to do with this one at this stage. CEO Mariotti.
I may as well add my 2 pennies worth on this
What
one.
the heck?
As Councillor Bocek has said, we're already working at 100% plus. When you look at the achievements that we've made over the last couple of years on our work plan, you'll see the number of items that we've checked off. So as council knows, council developed a strategic plan, and out of that strategic plan there were certain action items that fell from that staff have been working through, which are on the work plan. And then also on the work plan, the items that are on there are, other than some regulatory requirements that we have to do, some policy updates that we have to do, the bulk of the other aspects on the work plan are all council driven. So we are already allocating any extra capacity to council resolutions. And as you know, there've been dozens each month of go away and do work from council. And this is all, obviously it's flexible. So as the workload goes up, you know, we've heard some on council complaining, well, why hasn't this been done? Why hasn't this been done? Well, because you've thrown other items on our plate. So that's why we don't have time to dedicate 25% of our time. What I would suggest though is, and it could be, maybe have more of a discussion on our work plan and say, you know what, staff, we want you to focus more on item X instead of item Y. For example, you know, the updating the zoning bylaw and the OP is, to me, is highly crucial, because we want to plug up those gaps that we're currently seeing, that are currently causing some disparity between staff recommendations and maybe what council wants to see, which then takes us to the OLT. So we want to, you know, prioritize that. Well, now, and I'm gonna backtrack a little bit myself. Well, now, if we want to go away and do a debrief on 15 years worth of why we lost at the OLT, and try and analyze all the results and try and you know, figure out what the various factors were at play, you know, because it was different staff, different council, different regimes, and try and work on that. Well, that will now impact Derek's resources, take him away from trying to focus on pushing forward the future, you know, bringing the future closer instead of trying to look at the past. So basically what I'm getting at is, to me, this resolution doesn't make sense as it stands.
Councilor Cooper.
Regardless of whether it made sense or not, I would just like to say that what our CAO was talking about, which is some interaction and communications between council and senior staff, would be very productive before what final work plan is brought forward. So let's not get hung up on the 25%. Let's get hung up on working more closely together and communicating. That's really, and I'm not, this isn't being said as a criticism of anybody, including a criticism of council. But I think we can, if we have that input, well, guess what? We'll all be buying into the same thing more in the future. So that's sort of where I'm going. So don't get hung up on the 25%. It can be 2% for all not all I care, but it was just notional. And I'm hoping that we can have greater dialogue in terms of future work plans, and that's what I was suggesting here. And I think you're saying that can certainly happen.
Yeah, I mean, we don't create our, other than, like I said, regulatory policy updates, the you know, the things that we have to do to make sure that we're operating safely and that we don't do anything that may jeopardize the corporation. We basically, our work plans are council driven. Mm-hmm. So we're already listening, we're already doing what council wants to do. We haven't gone away and done our own little thing and ignored council. And the best way to really be transparent and open about that is that we show you our work plans. We have a resolution tracker. We have the legal files listing. We have spreadsheets coming out on Yin Yang to show you that this is what we are doing, council. And if you want to change the direction, well, council tell us and we'll do that.
And then I think all that's fair enough. What I'm really driving at, though, is that I think recently we saw some work plans, and they may be exactly what council asked you to do. But before we bring them forward and formalize them, it might be useful in committee of the whole to have council and staff talk about that work plan and then bring it forward to council. That's sort of what I would suggest. But anyway, there we go.
All right. So there's no immediate action plan on this by particular people, just a general idea of more consultation going forward. Okay. Do I keep going on? All right, number 5, gaining better understandings of the role we play. One of my concerns with this is, well, I have 2 concerns. One is that we have definitely had training in the past, and who knows, it may come up in some way in the training that we get. Is it next week that we have our next week's training? but I'm concerned about the line, as well as the individual roles that each member plays. To the best of my knowledge, there is not a role for each member other than being a member of council. In other words, we don't assign responsibilities to an individual councillor. The responsibilities are for council as a whole, to the best of my knowledge. And resolve that staff, including CEO, create a list of their primary roles. Well, they have the work plan. That kind of tells me what they're going to be doing. So I'm a little bit confused on what more, Councillor Cooper, you'd like us to see under this point.
So I think, you know, we brought up already the concept of council members grabbing a hold of certain areas of responsibility and assigned to something. But I think it's also just a basic understanding of both our staff and our council in terms of the roles that we do play, because sometimes there's some misunderstanding as to what that really is. Remembering that in some cases it may not be realized that you know, there's somebody looking for an approval or an application approval, but there's an approval is recommended in the planning area, for example. I'm just using this as an example. And then we forget about the fact that there's 19,000 residents who may feel differently. And so those are some of the roles that our councillors have to play in terms of saying, hey, don't forget about the 18,500. So that was sort of part of what I was trying to say here. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, may I just add my 2 cents here in that part of sitting down with you, Mr. Mayor, and sitting down with our CAO as individual councillors, I think we might have the first part of that, number 5, could be covered in discussions with the CAO when we sit down with them as to where we feel our responsibilities are within our own wards, because obviously we speak as council when we're here, but we do have our own specific constituents. So perhaps part of that can be covered in that discussion that we have with the CAO and with you, Mr. Mayor, early on. The second part of that, I'm not so sure about, because really everything comes in under the CAO. The CAO is responsible to us. The staff are all responsible to the CAO. So I'm not sure where we can go with that. But I think by us indicating where our responsibilities are to the CAO, that might help with staff's objectives when discussing things with us individually.
Any other comments? Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I have one other sort of thought on this, and that is that I realize that we're an administration and we're not a business, but I keep talking about the customer, and I do that for a reason. That we're here for a reason. It's to service and look after our constituents. And you know, one of the things that I've thought about since I've been on council is that wouldn't it be great if we had a customer service training program, as an example, where we start to see and name who our customer is, all our staff and our council, because I'm not convinced that we're exactly simpatico in terms of who we identify as being who we're responsible to. Some of our staff might say, well, the council's in charge, or the CAO is in charge, or the mayor's in charge, and I get concerned that we forget about that 18, 19, 20,000 people out there, and I think we do have customers in a sense, constituents, and I think it would be helpful if we were to give some consideration to making sure that we're all singing from the same hymn book and caring about the same customer. So that's part of what I was getting at here.
No, I think it's very important sometimes for us to council, even to remind ourselves that we're here for to best serve our residents, our constituents, our customers, and I think that's always a useful reminder that is our discussion going to end up better for our residents. Councillor Bochek.
Thank you. And I just wanted to state to the mover of this that I'm completely behind this, but in probably in a different form. One thing I've noticed that's worked at district council, and I think our mayor and Councillor Cooper can attest to, is we have committee meetings. Committee meetings are very specific. And say I sit on the health services committee. Then we have a chair, we have a few council members because we have 22 of them up there, so we got a few on there. And we have the senior staff members there to answer questions. So it's like a little committee meeting where you're flushing out stuff, you're getting it out, you have a little bit of an agenda, you talk about it, and then collectively you come up with a resolution, you take that to council to pass. I can see this being formulated something like that, where, you know, we were talking about 2 councillors, and then it's gone from 2 councillors to 2 councillors and a senior staff member. Well, maybe we just need to elaborate this a little bit and pick out the 3, 4, whatever major concerns are in the departments, and then put together a committee that will address this to bring recommendations to council. It's just another way of doing what is already here and addressing the same things that here, but I think it gives it a more formal process and perhaps a little easier to control, instead of just having it all mashed together in a committee of the whole meeting. I think it gets lost. I'm not an expert in everything. I come into the committee of the whole, I got this information, that information, that information. I don't know anything about any of it, but I do have knowledge in certain fields that I would sit on a committee of and give my opinion to. So just food for thought. It's another way of addressing this. And I think it would, well, the proof is in the pudding. It works at district, right? It works there, so I can't see why it wouldn't work here.
But I think in the case of district, their committees are 7 people. If we were to have a committee here, it'd have to be 3 people or less. Otherwise, it's a quorum.
Well, that's what
council.
I said. You have 22 members up at district, and you have maybe 7 on a committee.
You have 7 on the committee, 1 person from each lower tier, and the chair and Chair Lehman.
Correct. I see your point that in order, it would be nice if we had representation from each addressing this, and that's what COW is for. But I think things get lost in COW. There's not enough time. The push is on, get things done, where an evening sitting down with a department head, you, me, and Councillor Hazelton, hash out a bunch of stuff in a little bit of a committee format with an agenda and everything else, and then bring those recommendations to council. Not unlike what you said in the very beginning, but just formalize it into a committee instead of calling it a wrap session.
My concern, frankly, knowing this council, is if you had 3 of us discussing something at length and we brought it to council, we'd be discussing it all over again at length because the other councillors would want to get involved in the discussion.
I guess that's the difference between a quasi-judicial committee and one that's not.
I don't know, but anyway, where are we here? We're talking about the item 5. Do we want to take any action from this item at this time?
I mean, I haven't spoken yet, but
go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's I'm fine. Just to say that I have to speak, because Mr. Jarvis or Councillor Jarvis is telling me. I don't know what action we can take on this one specifically at this time. It's um, and maybe it's a question our CAA can ask our head of HR to, you know, if she has suggestions on how to make this, um, you know, a kind of an action item that council and staff have a better appreciation of the sort of the roles and customers. And I guess the only thing with number 5 is it's still a little bit integrated with one of our others down below. I guess training and orientation. Like, is part of this getting better understanding of the roles we play really part of training and orientation? And maybe we can leave number 5 and bring it back up to see how it fits in with number 8.
Councilor Cooper.
Just briefly, Mayor, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm starting to running out a little bit out of steam. I want to give everything here its due, so to speak, and I'm going to suggest that we're almost halfway through the list. We could work our way through the rest of the list at our next meeting of COW. In the meantime, we've identified some projects. I just think that you need to, this is causing a lot of thought, and it's great, but you need to be fresh, I should say. And so that was my suggestion, that we might sort of split the list up a little bit and finish the list at our next meeting.
Interesting enough, after we discussed item 6, I was going to ask council that exact question. If we got halfway, should we cut it off for now? And okay. Council, item 6, I believe Clerk Way is already working on this. So that's already been assigned, so to speak.
Correct.
So that was easy. All right, council, we got halfway through the list. And I'm wondering whether you have an appetite to continue, or if you'd like to say, okay, this is good. C.O. Mariotti.
Yeah, so sorry, Meg. Good to see you. I just want us, because Ms. Way has been refining what we discussed here to make a resolution. So
Okay.
I want to make sure that we capture item 5, and my thought aligns with Councillor Predgo's in terms of maybe rediscussing 5 together with was it 8? Because I do think there is a correlation there.
Yeah. I know I would be good with that.
I'm okay.
All right. Clerk Way, you're drafting all as we were speaking. But somehow I'm not surprised.
That's correct. Yes. Would you like me to share my screen so everyone can see it?
You know, one of the higher compliments I pay you is on your usefulness. As bland as it sounds.
The screen. Okay, sorry. Let me make this bigger.
See, I got to switch glasses here. There we go.
Is this more legible?
Be it resolved, the council receives the process improvements report from Councillor Cooper dated March 4th, 2025, and the council and staff move forward with the process improvement projects per the discussion of March 4th, 2025, and is summarized below. 1. Process improvements through debriefs. Mayor Coutser, Councillors Cooper, Jarvis, and the Director of Planning form a working group. 2. Goal setting for each term of council. Mayor and CEO to schedule one-on-ones together with each member of council. 3. Identification and selection of consultants experts. Councillor Predko and the clerk to review motion. 4. Annual staff work plans. No immediate action, more communication between council and senior management team regarding work plans. 5. Gaining better understanding of the roles we play. No immediate action, review again with item 8, training and orientation program. 6. Codes of contact codes of conduct currently on the clerk's work plan. And I can't read any further. And okay,
Sorry.
we'll just ignore the rest for the sake of this motion at this point. Council, what do you think of that motion? Any comments before I call?
Councillor Cooper wound up with no work.
No, he's in number one. He's significant input to number one.
What's your point?
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, going back to number 5, I think if we just took the second part of that, because as I stated, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think part 1 is something we can incorporate in with our individual councillor conversations with CAO and mayor.
So are you saying for?
So gaining a better understanding of roles we play, having staff getting a better understanding of council's roles and objectives would be something that can be discussed discussed between each individual councillor and you, Mr. Mayor, and our CAO when you sit down with us individually.
Okay. So in other words, for 5, remove no immediate action and replace it with include in discussions under point 2, or however you want to put that, and review again with item 8. And I'm wondering, with number 4, instead of saying no immediate action, saying encourage more communication between council and senior management team, or something like that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
That's a good suggestion, and I see that we have our building inspector over here, and she's going to volunteer to do some of this with us. I can see that right now. There's a big amount of enthusiasm.
We are fortunate with the senior management team we have, more than we realize. And I'm saying that with complete seriousness. All right, any other discussion? I'm going to have this moved by Councillor Cooper and seconded by Councillor Bocek. All those in favor? 1, 2, I'm 3. Like, oh, 1, 2. I see lots of hands. All right, that is carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper, I think we gave some time to this process improvement discussion, which I think was important to do. And so I appreciate it.
To everybody.
Okay. And then I got to scroll through all sorts of things that here and get down to, where am I going? Here I'm going. So is all that's left for me to do is adjourn this meeting, Clerk Way, with the cooperation of council?
That's correct, yes.
Well, then I'm going to have moved by Councillor Predko, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole does now adjourn at 3:19 p.m. to reconvene on April 8th, 2025, or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. And thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate this conversation and and the meetings of yesterday and today. And I'm going to thank you again for tolerating my absence. But for me, I'm afraid it worked much better to do these meetings remotely. And I thank you for your understanding. Enjoy the rest of the week. I think some of us will see each other, whether on